Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for me to make a confession. It is time for me to drop some of the details. And today what I wanted to talk about was the ToA, and the fact that the ToA is something that I really like. And I also think it's the game mode that's probably one of the most misunderstood across the entire community. It's a game mode that has gotten a bit of a bad rep simply due to some of its past predecessors, and especially considering the current state of some other endgame modes in Wuthering Waves, I do believe that the ToA, especially in comparison to something like Whimpering Wastes, 1,000,000% deserves an apology. And the reason for that is pretty simple. I consider the ToA, especially in its current iteration, and especially compared to something like Whimpering Wastes, I consider the ToA to be something that honestly encapsulates what Wuthering Waves is. Wuthering Waves, a team-based rotational simulator. That's really what it is at like its very bare bones. But the ToA is a game mode that lets you do things like rotations, do things like build teams, but then also throw all of that outside of the window, not even worry about buffs, and just go ahead and play something that might be a little bit more quick swap oriented, or even something with like triple DPS and still get really good results. It's a game mode that I feel like lets you experiment and push your roster building ability to the limits, try out a bunch of wacky new comps, and still find success, because at the end of the day, the clear restrictions are not very high at all. You have a full 2 minutes to get all of the rewards as long as you're able to reduce that boss's HP to 0. And I made a ton of videos regarding the topic about damage thresholds. You don't need to have incredibly high investment to get a lot out of this. And the thing is, it's also very predictable. It's also something where you can just know what the boss is going to do. You can practice your ToA clears just by going into the overworld and then fighting the boss itself in your downtime. The enemies and the patterns, they're all stuff that you're used to. And when you see one of these bosses in the ToA, you feel like you're sort of taking that challenge to the next level, right? You've got a couple of practice runs in the overworld, and now you get to really see what's up. You know, they're a little bit tougher, they do more damage, and they have more HP. Weewa, on the other hand, this game mode is a good blend of, different mechanics, right? Focusing a lot more on AoE. But unfortunately, one part of Weewa that I think really takes away from it is the fact that these tokens are actually in the game mode. And so much of the game mode relies on leveraging these tokens, relies on actually executing on the various strategies that might be really pushed forward by them. And oftentimes, Weewa can turn into a game mode where it feels like you're just trying to metagame around all of the different buffs available, rather than just play the teams and play the characters. I made a lot of videos talking about how overpowered the Plunderer's Captain Seal is, and how you should build teams that like focus on a shit ton of healing to get all of the best results and get the most comfortable clears. But at this point, it doesn't really feel like you're playing a team or like playing a strategy in your, with the characters that you're choosing. You're basing a team around the tokens that are being picked and then just trying to make the most out of them as much as possible. And it feels like the end result is that this almost doesn't feel like I'm playing Wuthering Waves anymore. It almost feels like I'm playing an entirely different game. And what I've been doing over the past couple of days when it comes to this game mode, ever since it got refreshed, about 4 or 5 days ago, it's just been doing these runs over and over, trying it out on different accounts, but it always just feels like I'm kind of just doing the same exact thing. And unfortunately, right, the difficulty is geared really high. This buff relying on actually dealing critical damage to get any impact at all is just a layer of RNG that doesn't feel very good. And the thing is, right, in Whimpering Wastes, I'll just do a trial run to show you guys. In Whimpering Wastes, you have so many different layers of RNG when it comes to your clear. You have the RNG of, okay, are the enemies in the right spot for me? Are the enemies going to do anything crazy? Are the enemies going to spawn on time? Or are they going to take like 3 additional seconds to actually spawn? And what ends up happening is that it feels like a lot of the time for Whimpering Wastes, you're playing a glorified slot machine selector. One thing I want to show you is right here. You're going to see a big difference in the damage that I'm able to deal here, simply depending on one thing. Whether or not I crit. This enemy just survives. And the thing is, that's because I didn't crit on them with my attack. And having so much of your clear, having so much of your success dependent on the RNG that's being brought to the table by your character's build, that doesn't feel very good at all. It definitely still has an impact on something like the ToA, but it's not similar at all to what we're seeing in WeWa. You also have to worry about targeting RNG. You might just like use your big nuke on one guy instead of the 40 other people behind you, and it just kind of feels like a mess. It kind of just feels like a mess. The other part of the ToA that is 100% undoubtedly just better than WeWa is the fact that you don't have to run 2 teams at once. Let's be real here. WeWa, part of it was kind of like make sure that you have like more than one copy of Moonlit Clouds, more than one copy of XYZ. You know, you have enough signature or limited weapons or just weapons as a whole to gear out your roster. But what it also means is that, let's just say I'm running these 2 teams, right? If this team is enough to scuff, I need to rebuild some characters, reslot in some different people. To get back to the second side, I will still have to redo this first clear. I honestly don't have a problem with the equipment not necessarily being shared. It's the fact that if I ever do want to retry the second side, I'm gonna have to do the entire first side again. And we just talked about how dependent this crit damage buff is on RNG. I'm gonna have to go through all of that RNG again to try to get anything close to a similar score. And it just kind of feels like there's so many different areas of friction. There's so many different hoops to jump through in Whimpering Wastes specifically. And when you compare it to ToA, oh my gosh. I just talked about how I spent 4 or 5 different days, right? Just solely, entirely focused on this game mode. And when I went into the ToA and I just did a clear, I felt like I was having the most fun that I've ever had playing this game. The literal, it was like night and day just going back to this game mode. Even though we have 15 days until reset, it was like night and day coming back to this and just trying out some more of my favorite teams' rotations and just trying out more clears. For example, it's like to challenge floor 2 over here, I don't need to do floor 1. But in Whimpering Wastes, I kind of feel like I have to, right? Like I have to clear everything on this side, run different characters, do all of that, and to ever even challenge this floor, let's just say I want to try out some clears against it, I don't have to do this one first. And that's something you have to do in WeWa. It's almost like a lot of the systems in that game mode, not even just from like the combat, are taking away from some of the core feel of the game. And when the ToA experience has been this smooth, where you just have a set amount of energy and you can move characters around whenever you want. Sure, WeWa doesn't have energy or like fatigue for characters. You can use the same character repeatedly over and over and over and over again if you want. There's just so many other hoops that are baked in that end up just making it feel worse than this one in every single way. I swear the second floor on the hazard tower doesn't unlock unless you do the first one. Yeah, it doesn't, but I don't need to do this one again to challenge this one. That's the point. While in Whimpering Wastes, to challenge floor 2 of Infinite Torrents, you have to do floor 1. That's the differentiation that I'm talking about over here. You can never just challenge floor side 2 of Infinite Torrents without doing the first side. And that makes the resetting here so much more intuitive, so much more fun. And it's just, you get to really do what you want to do in this game mode. And I'm not gonna lie. One of the biggest sort of pain points for me as a player, knowing how good the ToA really is just the fact that the reset time has been increased with the introduction of WeWa. And I'm gonna be real, I kind of wish it was back, because this is currently, I believe, some of the most fun that's being had with the game. I know there's been a lot of critiques for the ToA too, right? A lot of people have said it's just a clone, a copy of Genshin Spiral Abyss, but it's honestly better because the enemies are better. And when the game is entirely focused on reactions to the enemy and working around their movesets, when the enemies are better, the gameplay is just better. And we all know that Wuthering Waves has probably the best bosses in gacha gaming, aside from a select few. You know who they are. And the thing is, I feel like the game mode deserves an apology. I feel like people were kind of just bagging on it, looking for a reason to bag on something. Because now, there's an actual punching bag. There's an actual punching bag in the Wuthering Waves space. There's actually a game mode that deserves a shit ton of feedback and a shit ton of changes to make it actually feel like something that's worth doing. And I've already mentioned a lot of the stuff. In my opinion, with this reset, Kuro took the game mode backwards several steps. It was better on release than the current state of it now. And that's only made the disparities between WeWa and the Tower of Adversity bigger and bigger and bigger. And so with that, I just think the Tower of Adversity is kind of like the shining example of an endgame in this game. You could say that holograms are better. You could say that because, you know, they do provide a different layer of difficulty, but holograms have their own issues. Like bosses still attacking you between resets, like certain enemies having, you know, certain enemies being very bugged, as well as, of course, right, the fact that none of your resources are like fully prepped every single time you do another clear. And it's just like this game mode over here, the most annoying thing about it is the animation time to get into it. Kuro, please remove this. But I'm gonna be real, I think that's probably the only change that I can think of that it needs right now, because having gone through a clear of this after the pain that has been Whimpering Wastes and trying to get that whole thing to work, my oh my, it's been like night and day. It's been like night and day. And as long as Kuro leans away from these sort of like predatory buffs where they only work for like one type of character, as long as Kuro Games stops you know, integrating these and starts just having more like general buffs on all the sides, I think it's really just, I don't think there's too much more work that needs to be done on it. I think that it's just kind of like good to go. And as long as the enemy variety keeps increasing, maybe we see the Sentry Construct or something in here, I think it's going to be a fresh experience every time. This is sort of just like, this is almost like the bedrock for Wuthering Waves right now. I view ToA as the bedrock that is currently holding everything together, because all of the other end games kind of like have their own issues, their own things going on. And this is the one where it's consistent every time. It's delivered to a pretty decent degree every time. Sometimes the buffs are a bit iffy, but you don't ever need to leverage the buffs to get it clear. You can ignore this completely and easily clear with the right investment. You can ignore this completely, easily clear with the right investment. Ignore this one as well and easily clear with the right investment. And the thing is, you kind of can't really do that in all of the other end games, right? You can't do that in Whimpering Wastes, and you kind of can't do that in the holograms as well. You got to spend a lot of time really adhering and taking advantage of a lot of the things there. And by that, I mean the movesets. You can kind of ignore movesets in the ToA if you're invested enough or if you paid enough, but you can't really do that in holograms. So this game mode, it lets you have some sort of pathway to victory no matter where you are. You can either just rotate better, play with more well-invested teams and don't have as good rotations, or do neither. Have a bad build and have bad rotations, and just spend a lot of money on the game. There's a pathway for everybody to clear with this sort of content, and unfortunately in Whimpering Wastes, it kind of just feels like you really only have one option, and that's to just play around the buffs and beg the buffs to do the job for you. And I'm gonna be real here, guys. If you're getting tired of Weewa, if you're getting tired of, you know, continually resetting, being subject to the multiple layers of RNG that are involved in even getting a clear, just give the ToA another stab. Just give the ToA another stab, run a couple of your favorite rotations, or just, you know, spaz around and quick swap, and it will feel like you're playing Wuthering Waves again. It will feel like you are getting everything you were looking for out of this game again. And it's just like, it's such a breath of fresh air. It is unbelievable. So with that, hopefully this has explained why I think this game mode has gotten too much flack, and that it really should be getting a bit more love from the player base, because we've seen firsthand just how bad an endgame mode can be. And while Whimpering Wastes, I feel like, had a lot of potential when it initially released, the devs have literally regressed, unfortunately. They've gone backwards. They said they're going to fix it, but there still needs to be recognition of the fact that they've gone backwards and made it worse in their first reset of it all. And the ToA has never really done that, in my opinion, at all. So with that, let me know what you think. Peace.